Some stories begin with fame. This one begins with silence, the kind that comes after a scream underwater. On August 27th, 1994, Dee Dee Jackson, the ex-wife of Tito Jackson from the legendary Jackson 5, was found dead floating face down in a swimming pool in Bel-Air, 39 years old. A mother of 3, gone before sunrise. The man who called 911 that night was Donald Bohanna, a wealthy businessman twice her age. He said it was an accident, a night of wine, laughter, and a swim that went wrong. But the bruises told a different story. 50 cuts on her lips and face, hemorrhages in her neck, fear in her eyes frozen by the water. The official report said undetermined. But for the Jackson family, that word meant incomplete. They believed Dee Dee didn't drown, she was drowned. What happened that night behind those gated walls? How did a woman terrified of water end up dead in the deep end of a pool she never swam in? And why did it take 4 years, 4 autopsies, and the persistence of her sons, the R&B Group 3 Tons for Justice, to finally speak her name? This is not just a murder case. It's a story about love, betrayal, and power, about how even those born closest to fame are not safe from its darkness. She was the woman who loved a Jackson, raised stars of her own, and died in silence while the city slept. This is the story of Dee Dee Jackson, the night the music stopped in California. Before she became a Jackson, she was Delores Martez, a bright-eyed girl from New York, with a smile that made people feel seen. Her friends called her Dee Dee, short, sweet, and full of life, like the girl herself. She was born to Dominican parents who split when she was still a baby. Her mother packed up 3 daughters and moved to Los Angeles in 1968, a city glittering with sunshine and possibility, but heavy with the weight of survival. They didn't have much, but Dee Dee learned early how to turn struggle into grace. She was the kind of girl who made broken things look beautiful, who believed that love could fix anything. By her sophomore year at Fairfax High School, she caught the attention of a shy boy with a quiet rhythm in his step, Tito Jackson, the second oldest of the Jackson brothers. At the time, the Jackson 5 were already climbing towards superstardom. Girls screamed their names across America, but it was the soft-spoken Tito who fell for Dee Dee's calm. While his brothers rehearsed in hotel rooms, Tito would sneak away to call her long distance, hours at a time. She grounded him. He adored her. By 1972, they were inseparable. 2 kids barely out of high school, he, a star on stage, she, his anchor off it. They married young, quietly, without the flash of Hollywood. And while the world saw Tito Jackson, guitarist of the Jackson 5, Dee Dee saw just Tito, the boy who left notes in her locker and held her hand like he never wanted to let go. They had 3 sons, Taj, Tarell, and TJ, and Dee Dee poured herself into motherhood like it was her calling. When Tito toured, she stayed home, building the kind of life she never had as a child. Birthday parties with homemade cakes, weekend sports, family barbecues in the backyard. She refused to let fame raise her children. She wanted them to grow up knowing love, not tabloids. Friends described their home as warm chaos, music always playing, kids laughing, Dee Dee humming Motown tunes while cooking dinner. Even after her divorce from Tito in 1993, there was no bitterness. They stayed close, co-parenting with love and mutual respect. Tito once said, "She was my first real friend, and she stayed that even after everything." By the early 1992, her sons, now known as 3 Tons, were rising stars themselves, following in the Jackson legacy. Dee Dee, proud but private, supported them quietly from behind the scenes. She wasn't the kind of mother who chased the spotlight. She was the light behind it. But as her boys' fame grew, so did her loneliness. She'd spent her entire life loving musicians, managing chaos, holding others steady. Now, with her sons touring and their marriage long over, she wanted something simple: stability, partnership, peace. That's when she met Donald Bohanna, a polished, confident businessman nearly 20 years her senior. He seemed successful, charming, worldly. To everyone watching, Dee Dee finally looked happy again. But sometimes, the people who look like saviors are just better at hiding their storms. In the years after her divorce, Dee Dee Jackson was radiant not because life was perfect, but because she had learned to live without pretending. She was a single mother, a quiet success story, and for the first time, she was doing things on her own terms. Her sons, Taj, Taril, and TJ, were finding their voices in the R&B trio 3 Tons. Their first tours, their first interviews, their mother in the front row smiling, clapping, crying. She had been the shadow behind every Jackson spotlight. And now, she wanted to step into her own. But life has a way of testing those who finally find peace. That's when she met Donald Bohanna. He was everything. Her past wasn't older, sophisticated, established. A man with luxury cars, a private plane, a house that could swallow silence whole. He had power, confidence, access. To the world, he looked like the kind of man who could protect a woman like Dee Dee. And for a while, he did. He took her to charity galas, introduced her to politicians, whispered to her in restaurants lit by candlelight. Friends said she glowed again, that she finally felt seen, not as Tito Jackson's ex, but as a woman worthy of admiration on her own. They called it her second act. But not everyone believed the performance. Her son's young, but sharp sensed something off. Taj once told a friend, "He looked at us like we were props in his show, and they said he was controlling charming 1 minute, cold the next." When he spoke, it wasn't a conversation, it was a monologue. Still, Dee Dee stayed, because after years of being defined by someone else's fame, she wanted to believe in normal love. Don made her feel safe, or at least, he made her want to feel that way. He ran hospitals, insurance firms, and even opened a restaurant in Watts called Denny's in the Hood. The press loved it, a wealthy black entrepreneur investing in the community. To outsiders, it was a fairy tale comeback. But behind closed doors, the story was unraveling. By 1994, Don Bohanna's finances were collapsing. Lawsuits, debt, pressure. He had built his empire on confidence, and it was cracking. Friends said he was desperate to find a way out, and when Dee Dee wouldn't use her Jackson connections to help, arguments began. Loud ones, public ones. Her sons remembered the tone of her voice changing when she spoke about him, quieter, uncertain, rehearsed. Still, when she appeared in public, she wore the same soft smile. Because that's what women like Dee Dee had learned to do to survive, by pretending peace even when standing on the edge of fear. That summer, she told her sister she was thinking about ending things. She wanted to start fresh, focus on her boys, maybe move closer to them. It should have been the start of something new. Instead, it became her last chapter, because 2 months later, on a warm August night in 1994, Dee Dee Jackson walked into Don Bohanna's Bel-Air home and never walked out again. It was late summer in Bel-Air, the kind of night that looks calm from a distance, the kind that hides its violence behind still water and dim lights. On August 27th, 1994, Dee Dee Jackson drove to Don Bohanna's mansion for what should have been another quiet evening. Dinner, wine, music playing low in the background. To the neighbors, nothing seemed unusual, a couple enjoying the California night. But by 3:30 a.m., the house that once glowed with laughter would echo with panic. According to Don, they'd shared a late meal wine for her, rum and coke for him. They talked, laughed, argued a little. Then, he said, she wanted to swim. But everyone who knew Dee Dee knew one thing for certain. She was terrified of water. She could not swim. Don claimed he tried to talk her out of it, but she insisted. He said she slipped into the pool, swam a few strokes, then stopped moving, sinking silently into the deep end. He ran outside, shouted her name, grabbed a pool pole, and tried to pull her up. When that didn't work, he dove in, dragged her out, and started CPR. At 3:47 a.m., he called 911, his voice trembling, gasping. "She's not breathing. Please hurry." By the time the ambulance arrived, Dee Dee Jackson was gone. 39 years old, pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. At first, police treated it like a tragic accident, a late-night swim gone wrong. But when the autopsy came in, the story cracked open. Her body told the truth her voice never got to say. There were over 50 cuts on her lips, tongue, and ears. A bruise on her head, hemorrhaging around her neck. The medical examiner wrote, asphyxia, due to drowning with evidence of blunt force trauma. These weren't injuries from the water. They were from struggle, from fear. When investigators asked Don about them, he said the wounds came from his desperate attempts to save her, that she was thrashing, that he used the pool pole to help her grab on. But his version didn't match the evidence or the timeline. His clothes were barely wet, and the bruises were consistent with something else. Restraint. Still, with no witnesses, no camera, no confession, the coroner ruled it undetermined. Case closed, at least for the state of California, but not for the Jacksons. Not for Tito, who refused to believe that the mother of his children, a woman who wouldn't go near a bathtub alone, had chosen to swim at 3 a.m. Not for 3 Tons, who spent years fighting to reopen the case, begging the district attorney to listen. 2 years later, their persistence finally cracked the silence. Prosecutors re-examined the evidence, the bruises, the timeline, the motive, money problems, a fight, a refusal. And by 1998, the truth came out in court. The night wasn't an accident. It was rage, controlled, intimate, and deadly. Don Bohanna was found guilty of second-degree murder, sentenced to 15 years to life. But for the Jackson family, there was no celebration, only relief and an empty chair at every family gathering. When the verdict was read guilty of second-degree murder, the courtroom fell silent. No celebration, no tears of victory, only the sound of grief breathing in slow rhythm. Because in stories like this, justice never feels like healing. Tito Jackson sat still, hands folded, staring at the man who had taken the mother of his children. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. Later, he told the reporter, "You don't win something like this. You just stop losing." For 3 Tons, Taj, Terrell, and TJ, it was more than a headline. It was their mother's voice echoing through every courtroom ward. They were just boys when she died, young, scared, and suddenly forced to understand death before adulthood. They grew up under cameras, but this pain wasn't for show. When they stood on stage again, singing love songs to millions, their eyes told a story their lyrics never did. In interviews, they said what most sons can't. "We forgave him, but we'll never forget what he took." The Jackson family, one of the most famous in the world, learned something brutally human: fame doesn't protect you from tragedy. They had survived tabloids, scandals, rumors, but nothing compared to this quiet loss. Because Dee Dee wasn't a celebrity chasing fame. She was a mother who wanted a simple life, a home, laughter, love. And the world had stolen that from her in silence. The case struck a chord in America. It wasn't just the Jackson name, it was the story behind it. A reminder that domestic violence wears expensive suits too. That power doesn't always look like fists. Sometimes it looks like control disguised as care. As the years passed, Don Bohanna continued to deny guilt, filing appeals, requesting parole. Each time, the Jacksons showed up quiet, dignified, unshakable. Each time, the board said no, because sometimes silence speaks louder than pleas. In 2018, T.J. Jackson spoke publicly for the first time about the loss. He said, "Every success we've had, every time the world clapped for us, we wished she could see it. We built our careers in her honor." And maybe that's what love does. It refuses to die, even when the person does. Today, the Dee Dee Jackson Foundation, created by her sons, helps families healing from loss and violence. It's her voice, reborn through the same children she once sang lullabies to. A promise kept, because for the Jacksons, grief became purpose. And Dee Dee's story, once buried under silence, became a song of strength the world could finally hear. Time moved on, but for the Jacksons, There would always be two worlds, one before that night in Bel-Air and one after. Every August, her sons still call each other. No media, no public posts, just three brothers on the phone, remembering the woman who made them believe in kindness even after the world showed them cruelty. Dee Dee Jackson wasn't a superstar. She didn't tour the world or hold platinum plaques. But to the people who loved her, she was something greater, a safe place in a world built on noise. Those who knew her say her laughter was light, like wind chimes in sunlight. That she never walked into a room to take attention, she brought calm. She was the heartbeat in a family where fame often drowned everything else out. Even after her death, that heartbeat never stopped. It just changed rhythm. Her three sons carried her love forward in ways that would have made her proud. As three tons, they sang about loyalty, forgiveness, and resilience, the same values she'd planted in them long before tragedy struck. Their music wasn't just melody, it was memory, and every note carried her name. In 2013, they founded the Dee Dee Jackson Foundation, not as a monument to loss, but as a living promise. Its mission was simple but profound: to help families heal from grief through music, storytelling, and community. To give children who had lost parents a voice because they knew what it felt like to lose theirs. At one of the foundation's events, Dee Jackson stood on stage and said, "People remember her for how she died. We remember her for how she lived with love, with grace, and with strength that never needed a spotlight." That line became the soul of the foundation. Because Dee Dee's legacy wasn't written in headlines. It was written in the quiet, in the way her sons speak gently, in the way they treat people with empathy, in the way they never let bitterness win. Even Tito, her first love, still speaks of her with reverence. In interviews, his voice softens when her name comes up, as if the air itself becomes sacred. He calls her the best part of my youth. And maybe that's what true love leaves behind: not ownership, not forever, but softness. For the world, her story is a cautionary tale about power, about violence, about the danger of silence. But for her family, it's a testament that love, even after tragedy, can rebuild something good. It can become purpose. Dee Dee once told a friend, "I just want my boys to grow up kind." And they did. Her wish became her legacy. Today, her name is whispered not with pity, but with peace, because she taught her sons, and everyone who heard her story, that real love, the kind that survives storms, doesn't need the world to notice. It just needs to keep going. So when the world remembers her now, it's not through the darkness of that pool, but through the light she left behind. In her sons' songs, in the children her foundation helps, and in the quiet truth she lived by. Love doesn't end. It just changes who carries it. This was Delores, Dee Dee Jackson, the woman who taught love to stay even when the music stopped.